So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on similar privacy projects like Monero, and I also wanted to ask you about smart contracts and other features that you seem to have not focused on yet, and if you have any intention to look at those.
Well, those are two big questions. Okay, so first of all, there was a really great talk by ZCASH founding scientist Ian Myers yesterday, in which he laid into Monero and all systems that use what he calls decoy-based privacy. So you should go watch the live stream if you haven't, or the recording if you haven't seen it. Now the zero knowledge-based privacy that we have has different problems, but privacy is really, really hard, and I wouldn't want it to look like we've solved it, but we've made a substantial improvement that everyone needs to learn from. And I like to work with the Monero people on that, and we both benefit from each other. And the other question was about smart contracts. Yeah, so it's something that we've deliberately kept out of ZCASH and kept out of the public discussion of the future of ZCASH in order to keep things simple. Like in theory, we could extend ZCASH to execute arbitrary smart contracts. And as of about 3 weeks ago, maybe, a few scientists that include some of our scientists published a paper describing in a lot more detail how that would work and what the efficiency would be and what the security properties would be and so forth. But so far, I kind of want smart contracts to keep working on Ethereum and just pure private payments to be the focus of ZCASH. But that could change.
Hey, so besides just winning the, or educating users about shielded transactions, could you talk a little bit about the rest of the stars that need to align across governance, business, and technology to make that become a default?
Whoa, Amber, the questioner, is a member of the board of the ZCASH Foundation, which is a separate thing from my company. I'm the CEO of the company, and the ZCASH Foundation that Amber is a director of is a completely separate independent thing. And it sounds like a question that Amber should answer. What was that? Aside from educating users, governance, and business, oh, can I have my slides back? I have a slide about this. Anyway, the major touch point between, oh yeah, thanks, perfect. The premier touch point between regulators in the technology and between users in the technology right now is exchanges, right? This is a map of all of the exchanges that already provide Zcash to their users. And so they are actually the most effective both at educating users and at educating the regulators. Note that there are none in India or China. There are lots in US, and there are lots in Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, etc. One more thing that is really necessary is better UX, as everyone I think has figured out. We've all done this backwards by building the technology first and then trying to figure out how to put a user experience on top of it. So now we have to fix that and make a really good user experience and then figure out how to fit it to the technology. That's my answer. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you think a connection between Zcash and Ethereum is possible?
Oh, a connection between Zcash and Ethereum. Oh, that's a great question. Hey, listen, there's this EIP for Blake 2, a secure hash function. Please contact your friendly neighborhood Ethereum developer and tell them that you support the Blake EIP, because that would be one way to reduce the gas costs of Ethereum smart contracts evaluating the Zcash proof of work, which might allow certain kinds of connection. There's this whole crazy idea that is purely hypothetical, but Vitalik brought it up first, so I can say it, which is Zcash and Ethereum could just merge. So like, I don't know how this would work. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the support. But in the meantime, I think people using multiple different networks and technologies for different purposes is the pragmatic thing to do. But there are a few technical ideas for how we can have decentralized, trustless cross-chain interop And one of the details that would help is the EIP about Lake 2. Thanks.
Hi. I heard you saying a couple of months ago in a podcast interview that approximately 7% of all the transactions on Zcash are shielded. What's the state of the shielded transactions today, and what needs to happen that technically we will see more of them?
Right. So, Zcash, I didn't get into this. Zcash supported backwards compatible clear text mode. It's like HTTP and HTTPS. For a long, long time, everyone still supported HTTP. But then more and more people started supporting or even requiring HTTPS. Similarly, Zcash allows the old Bitcoin style non-private mode. And the questioner was pointing out that most transactions used only the old unencrypted mode. And what needs to change? So there's two things. First of all, well, three, sorry, it's a lot, but first of all, the cryptography, which is the whole first part of my talk, is that we needed to reduce the computation cost from 37 seconds on a laptop down to like a couple of seconds, so that reduces the barrier. By the way, this also reminds me when SSL was new, it was expensive, and computers were a lot weaker back then, and that was one of the reasons why it took so many years for SSL to become ubiquitous. But the other one is all these exchanges need to start supporting the encrypted mode in order to protect their users. And they need to understand, which they mostly don't because of this FUD, they don't realize that the regulators are almost certainly okay with that. They just need to tell the regulators, this is user protection, it's compatible with all of the regulations, and we need to do it to protect users. So after you contact your friendly neighborhood Ethereum developer, contact your friendly neighborhood cryptocurrency exchange and say you want encrypted, shielded transactions like SSL instead of HTTP in order to protect you. The last thing is UX. Like we're making a new wallet and stuff that I didn't have time to get into. Any more questions?
Hi, thanks for moving this project forward. So I have a question about, so say you are doing a service for the business where the business resolves their transactions, payments, and of course, yeah, there is this notion of privacy that, counterparties, different parties, they don't want to know about like with who the business is done. So perfect use case. Do you think that, or up to your knowledge, if for tax reasons, some regulatory or the tax authority could come and ask to the service provider, so let's say in this case, which is built on top of the ZCASH, to unreveal all the details about a certain entity?
Okay, I think I understand the question. If you have encrypted transactions on a public blockchain like Zcash, can some party, in your case it's the tax authority, come ask some other party to reveal some of the transactions? Yes, this is a really ill-appreciated fact about encryption. Encryption doesn't give you all dark all the time where no one can see anything. What encryption gives is selective disclosure of data. So Zcash is the first ever thing that it combines the blockchain properties of canonical append-only data with the encryption properties, which is that if you have the decryption key that lets you see some of the data in the blockchain, you can give that decryption key to a third party, and then they can see that data in the blockchain. See what I mean? It's really interesting. Yeah, so it's subtle, but the bottom line is it's possible to reveal data to some parties without revealing it to unauthorized parties in the blockchain, which is good.
Yeah, but that would require to share the private key?
No, not the key that allows you to spend money, a different key that allows you to see the transactions, but not to spend the money. Make sense?
Hey, Zooko, you talked a little about the regulatory landscape and the ban in India. Do you have any more insights to share or anecdotes from what's going on out there? Or regulatory?
It's not too much my place to say. I mean, the government of India banned banks from serving Bitcoin companies in India several weeks ago. And then just a few days ago, the most terrible thing happened. One of those Indian Bitcoin exchanges, which is one of the longest serving Bitcoin exchanges in the world, they set up, since the banks had been required to cut them off, they set up ATMs that would take rupees in paper and give you Bitcoins, okay? Because that was like the only remaining legal thing for them to do. And then the most horrible thing happened about 2 weeks ago is that they were arrested, which doesn't make any sense under the law, any law that I've heard. I don't know what's going on. So that's the last thing I heard about India.
Zooko, as somebody who thinks about privacy all the time, and can you paint a picture for us? Let's say, projecting from today to N years into the future, how would decentralized applications actually provide privacy for people, not just on the transaction level, but on many different levels?
Yeah, that's that technology. It's possible technologically, and there's this thing called ZEXE, Z-E-X-E, which is a science paper that describes a technology that could accomplish something along those lines. It's possible, cryptographically speaking, to have shared, distributed apps, which you get the property you want. I don't know the right word for it, but the property that the app is going to do the right thing and it can't be like subverted by the owner of the server since there's no server. You can have a distributed app which, when you use it, you don't have to link what you're doing to anything else about you. You don't even have to necessarily reveal the moves you're making within the app. So it's a lot of work. No one's actually implemented it yet, but scientifically it's possible.
Why do you think the adoption of ZCASH on darknet markets has been almost zero? And is that something that bothers you, or do you not really care?
Why do I think the adoption of ZCASH on darknet markets is almost zero? Is that something that bothers me? I think my best guess is, part of it is I've made some tweets saying, screw you, criminals, go away, this isn't for you. And that doesn't really change the scientific or the open source code, but I honestly think, because I heard this from someone who studies like the criminal underground, that criminals don't trust ZCASH because they don't trust me. And that doesn't bother me. I think that's good. It's like the darknet markets are a shitty early adopter market because they're small. They wouldn't be very active users. It's a tiny little minority, and then it would turn off the rest of mainstream society who would associate you with crime and drugs and whatever. So it doesn't bother me.
How ZCASH is expanding in Japan? There are some outlets which can legally accept currencies put on balance sheets. Are there any obstacles for wide adoption into fiat world because of this privacy?
I didn't understand the beginning of the question. How is ZCASH what?
Yeah, so are there any obstacles from regulators and other authorities to use ZCASH in Japan?
In Japan?
Yes, in Japan, where the cryptocurrencies are allowed to be used for buy and sell local goods.
There is an obstacle, which is there's a Japanese self-regulatory organization, which is the Japanese exchanges, that have published a draft proposal for how they think the government ought to regulate them, which says that the government should require them not to supply ZCASH. And I think that's a mistake on their part, is that they, like a lot of people, incorrectly think that encryption is incompatible with consumer protection and AML KYC processes and computer security and all that. So I'm hoping that they will notice the example of NYDFS doing the opposite. Maybe they'll even learn from the example of HTTPS 25 years ago, but that's currently in play. So Japan is gray on the map because it's an ongoing conversation right now. It's not settled. Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much for being here.